Welcome to this new automotive news video for Thursday, May 28, 2026. Today we're going to start with some pretty incredible news about Renault, which may have just doomed one of France's most strategic automotive industrial projects. We're also talking about Stellantis, which risks more than €1 billion in fines from the European Commission, Michelin announcing thousands more job cuts in France, and BMW, which has just revealed the entry-level prices for the iX3. And you'll see, it's going to sting. This video will have a very simplified edit for the simple reason that there's currently a power outage at my place, which means I just don't have access to my desktop PC, so I can't really edit like I usually do. This won't change anything about the information I'm sharing with you today, which is why I'm counting on you to support my channel and this video by leaving a like, subscribing for future videos, boosting this video if you enjoyed it, and of course, leaving a comment to share your thoughts on today's news. We'll begin with an amazing story about Renault and the French automotive industry. For years, Emmanuel Macron has promoted an industrial vision, France producing its own electric car batteries, controlling the value chain, and regaining automotive sovereignty. The symbol of these promises was Verkor, a French startup created in 2020 supported by the state, but above all by Renault. Verkor had a simple but strategic mission: to manufacture in France the batteries that were to equip future French electric cars. A gigantic project. We're talking about a gigafactory of over 100,000 square meters built in Dunkirk, a huge complex with potentially thousands of jobs at stake. Except there's a big problem. Renault, which still owns 20% of this company, has just refused it a contract that is vital for Verkor's survival, for a very simple reason. Renault believes that French batteries are simply far too expensive, and in any case, much more expensive than Chinese batteries. Indeed, Renault had committed to buying 12 gigawatt-hours of batteries per year, which was a commitment that represented about 3/4 of Verkor's planned production. In other words, almost Verkor's entire business model relies on Renault, except that Renault simply doesn't want to buy batteries from them anymore. So there's the problem of loans, but there's also the problem of volume. Several internal sources explain that the originally planned volumes will simply never be reached. The vehicles that are supposed to use Verkor batteries at Renault, like the Master, the Scenic, the Alpine 390, or even the future Flex van utility vehicle, wouldn't even be enough to absorb 1/4 of the volumes planned in the initial contract. In reality, current estimates are talking about 3 gigawatt-hours potentially being used, which is far from the 12 promised by Renault at the beginning. What's most worrying is that this turnaround is happening while Verkor is already facing significant delays, just like most other European battery companies. On paper, everything works fine. But when they try to ramp up to higher production volumes, that's when things go wrong. No one is succeeding, including the European giant ASC, which is also based in northern France. They're also facing major difficulties in ramping up production. They're about 18 months behind on orders, so no one is succeeding, not even Verkor, which now tells us that large-scale industrial production won't actually start before the end of 2026, which is almost 2 years later than what was originally planned. Meanwhile, Chinese and Korean manufacturers continue to flood the market with much cheaper batteries. According to Renault, the batteries produced by Verkor would cost between 30 and 40% more than their Chinese equivalents. And that's where, let's say, the issue becomes politically explosive. In the end, because Renault finds itself facing an extremely complicated choice. On one hand, either support the French sector, which is strategic for preserving the French automotive industry, and maintain the idea of European industrial sovereignty, and accept. Either reduce profit margins or raise car prices and likely sell fewer cars. Alternatively, buy cheaper Chinese batteries and sell cars at lower prices, which has become crucial in a still catastrophic automotive market. Currently, the head of Renault appears to have chosen the second option, prioritizing economic logic and stating it's impossible to keep using French batteries if it makes their electric cars too expensive and unsellable. So for now, Renault is refusing to launch new programs with Verkor as long as the prices remain this high, but the prices can't go down until Verkor reaches a large enough battery production volume to achieve economies of scale. It's a vicious circle, and it's a scenario that's very reminiscent of Northvolt. Pretty much the same thing happened with them. In that case, it was Volkswagen's fault, not Renault's. Volkswagen made a major commitment and failed to honor it, causing Northvolt's downfall. Northvolt, once Europe's top electric car battery company, has gone bankrupt and no longer exists. Interestingly, Renault is partly owned by the French state, which currently doesn't know how to handle this situation, as it's the same issue. It has the choice between putting pressure on Renault to work with Verkor and, as a result, putting even more pressure on a sector, and a brand already under pressure, even if it means weakening it long-term. Or just letting it do what it wants, and accept the risk that a French EV battery sector, and possibly even a European one, may simply never exist. If Verkor fails, it's not just a French startup at risk. France's entire vision of autonomy and electric batteries could collapse. A quick note, This news comes the same day Renault announced more bad news for the French auto industry: the closure of its Villiers-Saint-Frédéric site in France's Yvelines department. We'll see how it goes, but we're not out of the woods yet. Stellantis isn't out of the woods either. There's a new study conducted by Dataforce on all the car manufacturers that sell their vehicles in Europe, which found that if all car makers paid their CO2 fines, the system is complex, and I won't explain it here since I've covered it in dedicated videos. It's known as the CAFE standards. It's supposed to force manufacturers to sell electric cars by threatening them with heavy fines if they don't succeed. And that's exactly what's happening to Stellantis. But not only to them. In reality, the study shows that just for the years 2025 and 2026, all European car manufacturers should have to pay a fine of 12.8 billion euros, simply because they can't sell enough electric cars to offset the sales of their combustion engine cars. Among the most penalized groups, there is obviously Volkswagen, which faces a fine of between 2 and 2.3 billion euros, and Stellantis, which faces a fine of between 1 and 1.2 billion euros. A system that makes no sense, let's remember, since manufacturers are penalized by their customers' choices, even if they are willing and offer 10 electric models in their lineup. If customers buy combustion engine cars, they'll still have to pay the fine, even if it's not their fault. Ultimately, it's a counterproductive system. European groups would pay billions in fines, while Chinese groups like BYD and Geely are in the opposite position. They don't pay any fines. They can do the opposite. They can sell their CO2 credits, and since they mostly sell electric cars just like Tesla, well, BYD has 1.6 billion euros in CO2 credits to sell. Geely has 1 to 1.4 billion, and Tesla has 2 to 2.3 billion euros. It's an absurd system because it pushes European manufacturers like Stellantis, who have to pay heavy fines to buy CO2 credits from these well-known brands. So, for example, from Chinese brands, which basically means that money from European brands ends up directly in the pockets of Chinese brands, because they end up being penalized on their own soil against foreign competition, which is completely absurd at a time when the European Commission keeps talking to us about European industrial sovereignty. And unfortunately, the news I'm going to share with you today about Michelin won't reassure you, since Michelin has just announced another wave of layoffs in France. After closing the factories in Cholet and Vannes, the group has announced it will cut another 1,500 jobs in France by 2029, which is nearly 9% of its French workforce. Michelin explains this new round of job cuts by citing current geopolitical tensions, labor costs, taxes, French taxation, and, of course, the rising cost of energy in France. That's not the only reason. The European tire market is shrinking by about 5% as major brands like Michelin, Bridgestone, and Goodyear lose market share to smaller Chinese brands that offer lower prices. On one hand, sales of historic European brands are dropping by 5%, while Chinese tire brands are increasing by 7% over the same period. At the same time, BMW has just unveiled the entry-level version of its iX3. So be careful. When you see the price, I think you'll need to put big quotation marks around entry-level. This version is 8,000 euros cheaper than the traditional iX3. The problem is, even with 8,000 euros less, it's still expensive. And above all, it remains above the 47,000 euro threshold, which is the maximum price. Beyond that, an electric vehicle can't benefit from the electric car purchase incentives in France. The new version of the X3 now starts at 64,150 euros compared to 73,000 before. That's a big drop for sure. This new version is called X340, and completes the lineup, which until now was only available in the 50X Drive version. And obviously, to offer a lower price, BMW has downgraded some of its technical features. Where the 50X Drive version used 2 electric motors, one on each axle with 4-wheel drive and a high power of 469 horsepower. The 40 version now has only one motor, located at the rear of the vehicle with rear-wheel drive, and a power output that drops to 320 horsepower. It's the same for the battery and the range. The 50X Drive was based on a 108 kilowatt-hour battery, which allowed it to claim up to 800 km of WLTP range, a record for a European brand. The new entry-level version will be based on an 82 kilowatt-hour battery with a claimed range of only 630 kilometers. So I'm saying that even though it's still pretty good compared to other European brands, it still takes away one of the big advantages of the electric iX3, which was precisely its range. On the other hand, it's true that compared to what the competition offers at these prices, it's not bad. A Model Y costs about the same for similar performance and similar range. It's pretty well positioned, but you just shouldn't expect this X3 to finally be a versatile, affordable electric vehicle. The good news is it keeps the 800-volt architecture enabling ultra-fast charging. It will be available in 3 versions with 3 different equipment levels. The standard version at 64,900 euros, the M Sport version at 68,000 euros, and the M Sport Pro version at €71,650. BMW should also launch other versions in the coming months to further expand the range. And meanwhile, rival Mercedes with its GLC EQ is also announcing a more affordable version, but hasn't released its prices yet. And of course, as soon as there is more information on the subject, I'll talk to you about it in a video. So make sure to subscribe and leave a like. It always makes me happy. If you'd like to support further, click join below to become a channel supporter. See you tomorrow for a regular video. Thanks for watching. Bye.